Thank you very much, everybody, for coming this afternoon. As you know, we have Jan Sivertson here today, and she is going to talk about her family, and I'd rather just let her introduce herself because she's going to just blow our minds away. So welcome, Jan.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So I'm Jan Sivertson. Oh, this is a good spot to stand.
Right there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
Right
I
there.
guess
We're beautiful.
right here. Okay. No lights in my eyes, and I can see all of you. And it's really nice to be here because I know so many of you, and because I have a cabin here and have had for 30 plus years, and then the Isle Royale. So one of the things, so I'm Jan Sivertson, my dad and I, Howard Sivertson. This is the story, this is his story I'm going to present today. But he and I started the gallery together in 1980. And the reason I talk about the gallery is because, you know, it's art, and it led to the Once Upon an Isle book being published and all of that. So, can everybody hear me? Am I loud enough? Should I? I mean, usually people are not shy, and if you're quiet, they say, talk louder. So I'll talk loud. Okay. So Howard and I started the gallery together, and that's sort of an interesting story. But before I do that, I just wanted to say that in the crowd, Mary Anderson from Lutzen is here, and we all met on Isle Royale, her husband and I. And actually my ex-husband met in the early 70s, so we have an Isle Royale connection, and my family is all here. Sue and Jeff Sivertson from Duluth, my brother. And a lot of people don't know that I have a brother, but I do. He lives in Duluth. And the reason people don't know I have a brother is because he's rarely here on the North Shore, because he spends the summers on Isle Royale keeping up all the boats and the docks and the fish houses and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And all of that has been kept up since the commercial fishing there left in the... Actually, I'm not even sure what year it really left, but it really seriously left in the 60s. And then sort of retirement-wise, in the fall, there was some fishing going on. But anyway, I'm getting myself all confused here. So I was introducing my family, and so my nephew Chris and his wife Ashley are here, and with their kids Sam and Steve, and then my sister Liz is here. So a lot of Sivertsons are here in the audience to correct me if I'm to a name, which is really good, because names are the first to leave the building, is what I've heard. And so a lot of my names have left. And then all the, you know, my friends, like Becky Stoner and Nancy Seaton and Chris, who lives here, and Charlene, oh my gosh, and your story, oh jeez, and Sue, and Jean, who lives on Say, and again, here's my Julie and Skip, and this great new woman I just met, Karen, whose husband was a pilot for the National Park Service when I was out there working in the 70s. So that was really fun, sharing those stories this morning. And Dave Tuttle, and Mike Landy, and oh my God, so still some people I haven't met yet, but that's okay. So I'm going to move on to the story. So back to opening the gallery. So my dad had, in order to become a professional artist, he had been a commercial artist his whole life, and he really needed to simplify his life in order to really practice his craft and get his craft down. So he was an artist his whole life, and I'll tell some of those stories as I progress into the pretty pictures. So Howard moved into the woods. He sold the big house. The kids, he sent the kids off to wherever they were going, get them out of the house so he doesn't. So he got rid of all of his responsibilities. He divorced my mother and set off on his own to live in the woods with no plumbing and no electricity, which, by the way, is the story of a lot of artists beginning, and particularly in this neck of the woods. Artists are just attracted to that way of life, and it's, I'm not going to say it's ever easy to do, but you can do it here. You can get away with it pretty easily. There's a lot of people doing it. So there's room to do it here, which is really nice. So he did that for about 3 years and came out of the woods to do a wonderful canoe trip. And on his way out, he thought, I really like it here. I'm just going to drive through Grand Marais on my way back down to Brimson, which is where his little shack was. And I'm going to talk to a real estate agent, and I think, well, it wasn't you, Julie, because, you know, you're not that old. I'm not going to remember names. Anyway, one of the real estate agents, a famous real estate agent in town, who sold him on the spot a brand new house that had just been built with retail space in the basement. And so that's where we started the gallery in 1980, right next to the North Shore Federal Credit Union now. That house still exists. And after 2 years, he realized that that was not his thing. Business was not his thing. His whole thing was to paint. That was what he sought to do, and that's what he continued to do, which led to me taking the gallery downtown, and which actually it turned out I hadn't ever intended to open an art gallery, have an art gallery, but I really loved it. And so I took it downtown, and a few years after that, he met a wonderful patron, Lauren Swanson from St. Paul, who said, I have heard your stories about growing up on Isle Royale. I would love to commission the whole batch of paintings. And so he did. And then in 1992, this book, Once Upon an Isle, was born. And for those of you who don't have the book yet, or even want another copy, today only, well maybe another day, but today for sure, I've brought some extra books. For a $10 donation to Chik-Wauk Museum, I will give you a wonderful Once Upon an Isle book. And so, if you miss a detail, you know, because I'm not going to remember all the details, if you miss a detail, they're all in the book. And actually, I'm not going to have time to tell all the stories that Howard tells in the book. So there's a lot in the book that I'm not going to share with you today. And not only that, I'm going to try to do this by 3 o'clock, but I'm just going to warn you that I may go a little longer. And so if you need to get out of here, feel free. Don't worry about embarrassing yourself. You know, we won't make fun of you for leaving. So, yeah, I think that's the story where I want to begin the real story, which is why we're here, Once Upon an Isle. And this is the story of about a 100-year period in history where a number of Scandinavian people, just freshly immigrated, most of them, settled on Isle Royale and started commercial fishing. And particularly this story is Howard's story of his family, and so I'm going to focus mostly there. And so in 1892, his grandparents, Sivertson and Theodora Sivertson, immigrated from Norway and settled on Barnum Island, which is in Washington Harbor, which is right across from sort of the Sivertson camp now, which is Washington Island. Any of you, has everybody been to Isle Royale and experienced some of the stuff? It's a great place to go. It's hard to get there. And once you get there, it's hard to find a place to stay. But other than that, boy, is it fun. You can't stay in the lodge because you can't get them to answer the phone, but great camping. Actually, it really is a great place to visit. So, back to 1892, Sivertson and Theodora, and so started the fish camp on Singer Island, which is now Washington Island. And it was Singer Island because there was a hotel there at the turn of the century called Singer Hotel. And so they started their little fish camp there, and I begin the story of commercial fishing, which I'm beginning with this slide, which is sort of a fictitious family, and I'm starting in the middle of the winter. The fishermen were out on Isle Royale starting in early April through late November, and oh my God, I lost my train of thought. I became self-conscious. And they were out there all of that time, of course, because they had to make a living. And they were only on the mainland for a few short months, really during freeze-up. And during freeze-up, they would generally find a cabin or something or shack to rent on the North Shore. My great-grandparents, Sivertson and Theodora, bunked with a family friend in Ludson. And so this is a fictitious family, but the story begins here with the winter, and the whole family is involved. There may be some school-aged children, and you see the daughters doing homework, but the son is helping the parents as they actually create the nets. So back in those days, there was A, no road going up the North Shore, and B, you couldn't go buy nets. And so they had to make everything. And that they would be busy doing either that in the winter, or they'd be busy starting to fish in the winter. And so come April, they would pack up everything in this cabin, leave like in the middle of the night, and go to probably, well, whatever they were close to, whatever port the America was going to come into. They would go get on the America and then get transported up to Isle Royale. And so here they are arriving in the spring. We've got their gear. This would have been, I'm just going to pass that one. So here's the Winya. So the Winya was the next boat. So the America sank in Washington Harbor, just as you go into North Gap. It's sunk right there. And the Winya replaced it. So the America ran from the late 1800s to 1928 and it sank. And the America was a beautiful boat. It had beautiful staterooms, and it would deliver supplies, mail, etc. to the fishing families, and then also pick up the fish from the fishing families and get that fish back to town. So early arrival in the spring, the harbor is iced in, so they're unloading everything, including that wood stove is going to get unloaded and hauled, tugged in by hand over the ice. And the first thing the fishermen would do would be to get that, they called them gas boats. They were sort of evolved from the sailboat, the Mackinac. So the gas boat would get ready to go in the water right away because the fishermen were very competitive, and the first person that made it out there got the best spot. So, and they got the best spot for the whole summer. So it was a big deal. So they wouldn't even unpack anything from the trip on the Winya. They would get this boat, they're all wood boats of course, so they get them caulked and painted, and then get them in the water so that they can soak up. The, as you know, wood boats dry out in the off season, which I'll call winter, and they need to be soaked up, otherwise they sink to the bottom. So soaked up, get out there, and then start the really hard fishing was in the spring because the fish were, well, here's another spring. I'll talk about the fish in a minute. So this is another really, really hopeful sign in the spring. So the fishermen rarely wintered over, but Arnold and Milford Johnson were raised in Chik-Wauk Harbor, and their family wintered over, and they, the family had to hire this tutor, and she is really happy to see that first boat of the spring because she, doesn't have to be totally responsible for the kids, the education. I think she has a way to get off now, which I think she's really happy about, and because she's been there all winter. And so this is a very hopeful, and the kids, of course, they're happy too because there's probably something fresh to eat on the boat, and maybe even candy. I don't know how much candy there was around those days, but it's fun. Anyway, it's new, it's an adventure. Boat days were always a great thing to participate in. So, so this is just a little reminder that Howard, and I haven't told the story yet about Howard getting seasick, but Howard got really seasick his whole life. And when he went to school, when he was 5, so the fishermen's kids, once they turned 5, they had to go to school. So they would leave, or they would stay with relatives or friends on the mainland, and until school started. And the wife or the mother would either go out to Isle Royale with the fishermen in April, and just, the kids were just then cared for by the friends or relatives, or the mother would stay with the kids on the mainland. But the story I'm getting at here is this painting was Howard's first painting. And Howard, on his first day of school, he's 5 years old, he's been raised on Isle Royale, he's 8 months of the year, prior to this day when he starts school, and he can't relate to the other kids' stories. And so the teacher tells Howard, well, perhaps you could go to the chalkboard and draw your paintings, or draw your pictures of what you're trying to tell us, and that you really can't communicate with words. And so he spent the next couple of hours just filling that classroom full of drawings. So at 5 years old, he knew that was what he wanted to do. That was what he always really wanted to communicate, and he really had a great life out at Isle Royale. The kids just had a blast. And so telling those stories was really what he wanted to do. And therefore, so early in his career at Isle Royale, he painted this painting. This is the Sivertson fish house from that era. So he would have been like 13 or something about that time. And the other unusual thing about Howard was that his parents, knowing that he got seasick and knowing that he really liked art, they actually supported his career of becoming an artist, and they actually sent him to art school when he was old enough. So that was like unheard of in the fishing community. Fishing communities were hand to mouth. It's like survival. And so our Howard story is a little unusual. And then later, this is another later version of the Sivertson camp at Washington Island. And this is one of the few paintings that have actually my grandfather's fish house is right over here, which disappeared in the 50s as the Park Service burned it down. That sort of speaks to the primitive nature of the beginning of the Park Service and the beginning of the park in 1931. Isle Royale became a national park. And I gotta say, those first superintendents were really by the rules, by the book. They weren't always really nice people. They didn't have, they were like more like, I don't know, law enforcement. They weren't very nice. So actually the Park Service was not a very good name in my family growing up. And what happened was my grandfather, Art, lost his rigs in a huge storm and then couldn't get back there, couldn't afford to reinvest in fishing equipment to get back there for a year, and the Park Service just burned his cabin down. Actually, I wasn't even going to tell that story. I just did. Because I saw the cabin! In a watercolor later of the... So this is the old Mackinac, which at the turn of the century they would have fished out of this two-masted sailboat, rigged way differently. So the commercial fishing that they do now, well, they don't do it anymore. That's over, but was way different. But it's a beautiful boat, isn't it?
It is.
And there's another shot of that early fishing. And then these are the boats of more recent. They were evolved from that Mackinac. They were redesigned by a few boat builders on the North Shore. The most famous, the one that I'm familiar with, the person who built this boat was Reuben Hill, who lived in Knife River. And they were built with a square stern, of course, because, and you'll see in future slides, because they could pull the nets over the stern, and then somebody could be in the front of the boat resetting the nets. They could get the fish out of the nets, and I'll show a picture of it, because I don't need to explain it without the picture. But this is also depicting the early spring fishing. So I think I already mentioned that the fish in spring are at 150 to 200 feet deep. And so I didn't talk about that. First day of fishing, the fishermen, they've got the gas boat all ready, it's floating, and they're ready to go. And the first thing they would have to do is get the bait fish, which were herring, and they'd use a flat bottom stiff, and that didn't have to soak up quite as much. So they'd get out there and get the bait fish right away, and then come back, clean them, and get them prepared for hook line fishing, which is what this is depicting. And the hook line fishing, again, it's like really deep fishing, and every line went to a herring strung on a bar with a hook on the end, like tucked right in the bottom of the herring, and so that the really cleverly designed, so the herring would be floating vertically in the water and would attract the lake trout. And so that whole getting back, getting out there with the hook lines, getting them set would be probably like an 18-hour day. And so that's why I think a lot of the wives went with the fishermen, because who's going to cook them lunch and dinner and all that stuff. So really, you had to be, you needed somebody. You couldn't, this is a job you couldn't do alone. And you also see that there are always two people in the boat too. Nobody fished alone. And this is sort of a painting depicting the father-son relationship. So this is my grandfather Art, and then Buddy is sitting there on the side of the boat, probably had just thrown up. And he's seated and trying to help as best he can. Yeah. And this shows, okay, why it needed to be a square stern is so you could pull the nets out. So this is a different kind of fishing though. This is not the hook line fishing that I just showed. This would happen later in the season when the fish were up on the reefs, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. Who knows if that's right? Okay, nobody. Okay, so that means it is right. Or who's wrong? And so this is how they would fish for herring. This is the skiff, and these nets were set not that far out, like the hook line fishing. They would go miles to get to those areas for fishing. This was usually close, and again, this is bait fishing for the hook line fishing. And food fishing too. So some days it was too rough to get the fish, too rough for the boat to come into the harbor. So this is the America meeting a fisherman out on the lake, which is going to be kind of tough getting those fish into the boat, but I think they're going to do it. And the America was always a welcome sight, so boat days everywhere. Again, this is before the highway. So America went into all of the ports, all the areas where commercial fishermen would meet them. And I think I mentioned they also took passengers, tourists to the resorts like Rock Harbor Lodge or Singer Lodge. And so you might notice that some of these people are not dressed like fishermen, they're dressed like designed and they're city folk. And they're going to the resort, and they're probably going to get on the boat and go to the resort. Another great picture of boat day where everybody is happy, sun's out, probably wasn't too rough. I think this is the Winya, and I think that's Captain Christensen, and he is the evil man that when my dad would get on the boat, he'd walk that gangplank when he was a little kid, and laughing, he would hand Buddy a puke bucket right away as he got to that boat. So my dad hated that guy. And there he is again, the Winya. And the Winya, of course, went around the island just like all the other boats. So this, our camp was on the west end, Washington Island, Washington Harbor's on the west end of the island. This is at Pete Edison's in Rock Harbor, which is, it's just a really sweet place. It still exists, it's been restored. If you get out to Isle Royale, get on a boat tour to Pete Edison's. It's a really sweet little tour. And you see all those people who are dressed city folk, because they are probably, they're either going to the lodge or they're just returning from the lodge. So Stanley and Art, two of Tidora and Severine's kids, created Sivertson's fisheries together in the 40s. And part of the Sivertson fishery was Grand Portage Transportation Line, and this is the Voyager 1, their first boat that would take passengers and supplies and mail around the island. And so this boat was captained by Roy Oberg, who is, yes, Julie's husband is a Roy Oberg descendant. And Roy Oberg was probably the most famous Isle Royale person ever. But I'll tell that story when we got a picture of Roy up there. And this is an interesting, because this is the Voyager 1 too, and again, you know, you couldn't always get the boat, you know, the big boat into the dock. It might have been too rough, or for whatever reason, or maybe there wasn't enough to bring into the dock. So, and actually, they must have radios in this day, because how would they know to go up there? But the couple on the bow are Joanne and Mike Huss, who, as it turned out years later, were really dear friends of Natalie and Ken Rusk. And they always would come up to North House events and hang out with Natalie and Ken. And, so it's kind of a sweet story. And I don't know how they discovered that it was them, because Howard didn't know that when he painted this. Anyway, we're all connected somehow. There he is. Yeah, there's the guy. So this guy Over 50 years he worked for Sivertson, navigating all the boats, the Voyager 1, the Voyager 2, and the Rita Maria. I think the Rita Maria is the one in the harbor, in the Grand Marais Harbor up on land, I think, who several people have fished out of, and the Disturbance. And Roy's amazing navigational skill, he could navigate by smell, along with all the other methods. He knew where he was by, oh my God, you can smell the bluebells or a certain kind of lightning, and the sounds, well, the waves are hitting the rocks just right. And he was so amazing. He had a lot more senses that he used when he was navigating than most people. And he did it until we had several retirement parties from him. But he didn't want to leave. Finally he retired, and then he died. But a character too. So if you were sick on his boat, you didn't want to see Roy, because he would come out of the cabin, just wearing a pork chop all over his face, and then he would come and laugh at you as you're throwing it over. Because all the captains weren't always that nice. Actually, he really wasn't that nice. He was really nice to some people, but not nice to other people. And if you threw a cigarette off of his bow, oh my God, he almost tossed you in the lake. Yeah, that would have been a bad thing. And if you didn't get your mail, but you asked him about your mail, he would say, "Oh no, I haven't seen it. But this is what it said. This is what that one said." He was a character. So another one of those perilous trips. I love this painting. This shows the bachelor cabin. And there were always, so each boat, of course, had a team. And I think this is my uncle Gus, who was a bachelor and who was a horrendous alcoholic all winter, but somebody would go grab him out of the bar and then dry him up and then bring him out to Isle Royale where he wouldn't drink a drop all summer. And actually there were a lot of stories of serious alcoholics that were captured in the bar and then brought out to Isle Royale to work all summer and then drink a drop. So it was a lifestyle. And it was hard being on the mainland in the winter if this is what your real life was, if this is where your dreams were, if this is where your work was. So anyway, this is a great painting because it shows a lot of the details of the life. So one of the things my dad talks about in the book is the smell as you walked into this bachelor's cabin. So first of all, he's wearing wool underwear that he's probably had on for at least a week, maybe 2 weeks. Turn it inside out and he wears some more. But he said that they didn't smell. I mean, they smelled, but they didn't smell bad. It's sort of like this whole idea that humans stink is kind of, it's a new concept, and it smells different than like soaps and deodorant and all that kind of stuff. But that whole idea that humans stink is kind of a new thing. It's like they smell good after wearing all that sweaty stuff all that time. And you got some socks, probably wet wool socks that are hanging by the door. That's smelling up the place. And coffee is on the stove. And there's probably, with most of the fishermen, there was probably a snooze container somewhere. That smells like something. When I say snooze, I can smell it. He's got some fresh baked bread there, and then the classic. All the fishermen like to read the cowboy stories. It's sort of like they just love the cowboy stories, and so he's got his cowboy story right there at the side of his bed. And of course he's reading letters from probably a loved one he's probably not going to see for a while. Maybe, actually I don't think they got letters from Sweden or Norway, which is where they came from. That I don't think that kind of mail happened in those days. Although if it did, it happened quicker than it does now. So Pete Edison, what a great, he was married to, I'd have to go through all the children, and then they married other fishermen. But anyway, all these kids that came from these fishermen that were there from the late 1800s, then married other fishermen's kids. And Pete was married to, I told you Arnold and Milford grew up in Chik-Wauk Harbor, and Pete was married to Laura, their sister. So I guess Laura grew up there too. And Pete loved to feed the seagulls, and he loved to train the animals. And he trained otters, he trained seagulls. And the sweetest thing he said is somebody asked him, because he would train the seagulls to sit on his hat. And so often people would catch him with a seagull on his hat, and they would say, "Isn't that kind of risky? Don't you ever get pooped on?" And he said, when you invest in a long, dear friendship, you're going to get pooped on. So, mixed into the day of being out there for many hours, there was the shore work, and this is where the whole family participated. And this is later in the season when the days are nice and it's sunny. It's probably a little warm, and they're done with the hook line fishing, which was like I said, 18 hours a day or longer. And we've got they're drying the nets and repairing the holes and repairing the buoys, and little girls playing with the doll, and the kids over here are rubbing. I think this is Cooper side, and is that right, Jeff? Did the net floats get or the corks get?
Linseed oil.
Oh, linseed oil. Okay, so that's a bucket of linseed oil. The corks are being cared for so they don't rot, and then they're being rubbed and cared for a little bit more by the kids over here, and then put over on the net so they can dry out. But my dad's paintings had all the details in them. Oh my gosh, there's so many details if you look carefully at them. In fact, I'm looking at that detail now. I just haven't seen that before, and I don't really know what that is. And moving day, as happened in other water cultures, this is how you move your house over the water. And if it was a log house, of course, you took it apart and numbered the logs and you put it back up someplace else. But this one's kind of amazing. In fact, this had to have existed because you can't make that up. It's a two-story building that they're hauling. That's kind of remarkable. But they, fishermen and any community of remote people, like I found this out about the Arctic people too, the little remote villages in Alaska, where they always won the contest in engineering and figuring stuff out. Oh my God, they're brilliant. Their lives depended on it. You figure it out. And then this is one of the favorites. This didn't happen very long, didn't happen very long because quickly discovered. But when you push a cow out of the big boats, that's how they got there, just like people that you just push them out the window, and they do swim, which is kind of nice. And so they lived, and then, but you couldn't force them to swim to the other island. So, because their life didn't depend on it. There was grass over there, so I'll just stay right here. So they had to get rowed because they quickly ran out of grass on the island. These islands are small, so there really isn't that much grass on them. So this lasted maybe a year or two, and I think they nixed that idea. That's not working very well. Just another sweet scene of, the wildlife. Moose were everywhere, and you had to be kind of careful of them, obviously. As actually, my Chris and Ashley just experienced moose going at it, two bulls on Hungry Jack Road the other day. So it's happening. Beware. So this is the story of the opportunist mind of a commercial fisherman, and the positive thinking they always had. It's like, oh my God, somebody just reported that there were a whole bunch of herring in this cove, and so they got the word out to everybody, and everybody showed up, and they're thinking, wow, we're finally going to get rich. We are going to be so rich. And so everybody showed up. They all took their places, full of herring, seining first, and then hauled back, and then spent probably close to 24 hours getting these fish ready for market. And so they just quickly set up stations and dressed all the fish and got them you can see these fish these boats are full of fish, got them in boxes and barrels and ready to ship off to town, only to learn a couple days later that, of course, the market dropped in fish. And so they probably barely broke even, but they would do it every year, and they would forget every year. So that didn't happen that summer again, but it did the next year. It's like somebody would see the herring, it's like, oh my God, we're going to get rich, call everybody. And that's kind of uncanny if it happens every year, that the market drops out just when you get all the fish. It's kind of fisherman's luck, I guess. So laundry day, they're heading to, so at one spot on Washington Island, they had a little shack with a old-fashioned, well, really old-fashioned water. I mean, yeah, wringer. They scrub things, and so that they would roll their laundry rather than everybody having one. They had it in one place, and then they'd roll their laundry to do their laundry. And of course, the kids were always having a good time. Of course, didn't miss an opportunity to fail that hope. So this was the invention of my grandfather. So he thought, oh, I want to save those women from this chore. And so one day he got the water ready in that tub and got the soap in there. You know, they shave it off these bars and naphtha. Got everything ready, and then got his probably not his very best outboard motor, but a outboard motor, and one crank on that thing, and the laundry went flying in there. Yeah. But I do get a kick out of that sweet little pink bra. It's like, I'm not sure who that fit. Yeah. And then, of course, the other hazard with laundry is that, you know, if moose got tangled in your your laundry got dragged. So, Shar, did your mother do laundry like that?
We all did laundry like that.
Yeah.
The kids all took part in that.
Yeah. So the reason this is interesting because it's an isolated community and without any stores or any of that stuff, and so similar to the Gunflint Trail too, which is another isolated community. So the stories have a lot in common. Hard work is the main thing.
Yeah.
And animals and fun with animals, right? Fun with animals and hard work. And so Grandma Tedora, you know, this is really interesting because, and it's true in the Indian culture too, that people work really hard and really long hours, but they always make time for aesthetics and beauty. That's the reason. And I'm always like sort of stunned by that. And in Inuit culture too, it's like when they started making those prints, the Indians started making those prints and carving, it's like, oh my God, such gorgeous artwork. It's just phenomenal. Right out of the chute, it was just like exploding, waiting to come out. And so she had her flowers. And that little girl has her slingshot. I don't think it's aimed at Grandma, but it kind of looks like it. So this is the story of Buddy, my dad, and Dickie Eckel. And Dickie Eckel was, so there's Stanley, Art, who became the Sivertson Brothers Fishery, and then there was Bertha and Myrtle. And Myrtle married Milford Johnson, one of the Johnson boys I talked about earlier, and Bertha Sivertson married Dick Eckel. And so this is Dickie Eckel. And so Patty Nelson was an Eckel, and was an island brat, clearly. And they probably called themselves that. This little red boat, however, was rotting by the shore. And these two little boys thought, we're going to make that sail. We're going to make that work. And so they asked my grandfather one day while he was really busy doing something, it's like, can we have that boat? We'll fix it up. And Art said, yeah, go ahead. You're never going to fix that up. And to his surprise, they fixed it up and went on many lovely adventures and had to be rescued a lot. Because they wouldn't they wouldn't bring it up far enough on the beach, or, they forget because they're going to go over there and maybe fish for brook trout, or maybe go over there, and it's like, oh, here we go. Luckily, it was red, so it showed up. Somebody would notice, because they certainly didn't have radios. So, in retirement, so this is Tedora and Sam in retirement. Namesake Sam, Severine. So, too bad they didn't name me Severine. That would be a fun name for you. So this is a great story about partnerships. Both worked really, really hard. But I'm just going to say here that the man got to retire. The woman didn't get to retire from cooking and cleaning and all that stuff. Not only that, but when he was retired, then she also had to row him up to his nets. And so, but she would very stoically, strong as hell, row him to his nets, and while and of course when you're rowing, you can't see where you're going, so you depend on that person sitting on the stern to holler directions at you. And she really appreciated when you're rowing really hard. And so he would sit on the stern and with his pipe, just barking directions at her. Row up, row down. And then if he got really tired of talking, he would just go, which I'm sure she really appreciated. And then would just turn around right before hitting the dock on the way back. That's when she would do that moment, just to make sure that she could dock the boat correctly. And as soon as that bow hit the dock, he would say, "There's lunch." That's when she started using her Norwegian words. So partners again. So this is Myrtle, one of the Sivertson offspring, and Milford. And they fished, actually they pretty much fished alone and Nikolai. They fished all over the place. So that's the other thing about fishing. They moved and nobody fished. Well, actually the Sivertsons did. They fished in the same spot the whole time, but they moved around. They fished over on the south side, on Davidson for a while, and then but most recently where I remember them from was fishing from the Migdalite. And because they were the only people in that community, the two, after their kids were grown, and they had like 9 kids. Am I right? Am I wrong? They had a lot of kids. But anyway, she went out on the lake with them. It wasn't that often that the women would go out on the lake, but if you don't have another person to go on the lake, you're partners. You do what it takes. And that's what they did. And of course, that doesn't mean that Milford helped or was a partner in the cooking and cleaning and all that stuff. I don't think he ever baked a loaf of bread. So Myrtle would bake. She probably already baked 12 loaves of bread, because the other thing, as soon as they would get in, actually Milford would then go to clean the fish, but she would go about getting the bread ready because company would stop. I mean, they had company every day. It's like they had fresh bread because they gave you fresh bread. It's like they asked for it. Yeah. Speaking of another thing, pulp logs. So every once in a while, logs being logged by loggers on the North Shore would be transported in these big booms, and a big sea would come along and break up the logs, and the fishermen were opportunists and they'd get them. And these are probably a little private boom they just created from a bunch of logs that washed up on a beach somewhere. But they were also careful to only grab the logs that were from the gravel beaches, not the logs that were from the sand beaches, because they learned very quickly that sand embedded in the log wrecked your saw.
Yeah.
So these became the lumber. I mean, all the houses were built from these, and firewood, and docks, dock cribs, and it was kind of a handy place. Everything was just kind of provided. But I also wanted to say about Howard didn't just paint the story. He painted the feeling of the story, and his use of color was profoundly romantic. And this painting really depicts that. Just the light on those waves, and the green in that wave, and even this blue to that green, it's like, oh my God, that color combination. And then just the little red ends of the cigarettes. It's like, oh, that is so exquisite in the clouds. There is no black in that painting. He was from the no black school at that time, which actually was a thing. There's some good stories about that too, but not about him. And another fishing, lovely fishing, but beautiful. Again, he was just a master at painting a romantic scene. I mean, these paintings are gorgeous. And lunch break on the hook lines. A nice, calm, sunny day where you can relax and not have to work so hard. And more fishing. I guess they did a lot of fishing. Oh, I guess they had that one here twice. Oh, well, you've seen that one. And you've seen that one. Oh, you didn't see that one. Well, anyway, pulp logs, gravel beach, not sand beach. And this was, at the end of the day, kind of a nice social event when the fishermen would come in with their catch and they would be cleaning. And of course, Severin is still there. He, you know, I never met him because he died a few years before I was born. And Tedora died a few years before that. So, but I'm imagining that he was not that nice a guy, and and actually the story proves it. So he's sitting there watching these people work really hard, and he's making comments like, "Huh? How come you guys don't have as much fish as the echoes over there?" But Tedora is scrutinizing every fish because she's picking one for dinner. That woman was going to pick the best one. She had to see them all in order to know which was the best one. And the kids, of course, are fishing through a hole in the dock. All the docks had these live wells in them, and where you would want to keep a fish alive for a while, and or you'd want to fish speckled trout or brook trout or something. The kids knew where the good fish were. And the kids were raised to be opportunists, and so this is Buddy Howard in the middle, his sister Betty, and then Dickie Eckel. And they learned that, well, they could learn by smell, but they also learned which days who's baking what. And they made their rounds, and they would offer to do chores, which, you know, that's a good trade, right? You know, get some chores for fresh cookies and fresh bread. And so, no wonder the kids had a great time. But I think this is, it looks like Claire, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be Tedora. But anyway, it's like one of those ladies, fishing ladies, is scolding Dickie, I'm pretty sure, because he has a toad in his hand, and the rule is no toads in the house. In Bible school, of course, you know, you got to gather the kids to study the Bible every once in a while, whenever you could wrangle them. And you know they're not going to sit there for long because they still have their slingshots in their pockets. But it's kind of a nice scene of the way the inside of the cabins look. And the beauty of it is they still look like that. Jeff, this is the caretakers, right? Your cabin, and it looks exactly like that, right? Yeah. Right down to the moment. Opportunist moment, the boat is sinking, and it probably has a lot of good stuff on it. And this boat didn't sink fast, so it was up there for like 3 weeks just hanging on the reef. So they got a lot of good stuff off of this boat. I think this is the boat where they got all that flour, so that Tedora could make flour for the lodge for that whole summer out of the flour that they recovered off of this boat. And then a lot of the fishermen got really fancy suits, like white coats and spats and dapper hats and stuff. So changed their design and wardrobe a little. Dead reckoning. Does anybody know what dead reckoning is? I bet a lot of people know what dead reckoning is. Yeah. So I used to know what it was, but I was puzzled, and so I had to look it up because I thought you could dead reckon not knowing where you are, but that's not true. You have to know where you are to start dead reckoning. So what happens is you know where you are and the fog moves in. Then you can dead reckon your way home, particularly if you have a chart. You can do it with a watch and a compass. So you just, you figure it out. So using your watch, you know how far you've been traveling, you know how fast your boat goes. And so you can keep track on the chart where you are as you're traveling to your destination. Almost always, if you're good at dead reckoning. And they were pretty good at it. Menagerie Light, I'm not sure why I picked this one, but it's a nice painting of, and actually kind of depicts the simplicity of what Howard was able to accomplish to really show water. And also he was a master painter of water. And I've noticed this about a lot of painters. Some painters paint water, but it doesn't, you don't believe it, it doesn't look like water. But people who have been out on the water a lot, they can paint water. But also there was a family of lighthouse keepers family. And they had 13 kids which they raised on that island, the Malone family. So that's kind of a good story. And not too far from there is the Wright fishery where the Holties lived. And these cabins have been bouldering for years, and now they're actually being declared boulder by the new National Park Service plan. So these cabins will be allowed, and they'll just rot away and never to be restored. So the Park Service is really focusing on cultural communities for where they're allowing restoration, and the places where it wasn't part of a cultural community, they're just saying those are going to molder. So that plan had tons of public input, so it's not like they did this in a vacuum, but they've got all the input and they did what they wanted to do. Isn't that the way it always was? No. I know that they really scrutinized all the public input they got, and public input is the beautiful thing about national parks. It's what keeps things that we all value, and like, you know, there had been more of that when my grandfather experienced his problem. They most likely would not have burned down the shack. So the public input is a valuable tool. Another nice picture of Ingeborg Holtby's place. And then Pete and Laura Edison. Again, I'm sure that seagull's coming in to sit on his cap. I'm pretty sure. But it's just a really sweet, Pete Edison's place is just really charming. There was something about the choice of his colors, you know, the white cabin and the red trim, that was just so tearful, not tearful, cheerful. And it's the same today. Beautiful. And the Park Service has restored this, because it's not too far from Rock Harbor Light, where there's a fabulous little museum with a lot of photographs in it. And got the herring skip over there and the gas boat over there. And Milford about to ride a moose, which...
That must be AI.
Yeah, this is AI. Yeah, they imagined this, yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, so the important thing when you're going to ride a moose is make sure that they're over their head, because if they can lift their hooves up, you're not going to get on very well. And you got to get off before they reach the other side and can touch ground. And I'm not sure how many times he did this. I'm not even sure that he did it once. But imagining it. But this is a sweet story. So again, this is Milford and Arnold, his brother, and Rock Harbor Light. This is a painting of Rock Harbor Light. So Pete's place is just around the bend over there. Just a really charming place, just outside of Rock Harbor. Great greenstone picking beach right there. I didn't say that out loud. You're not allowed to pick them, but you can find them and send them back right there. So anyway, Arnold and Milford would often come in from the lake and race each other. And Arnold always won. And my dad felt really sorry for Milford because he never won. And so in this painting, Milford's winning. So, he felt bad for losers. And did I show this, Carly? No. So there's another, maybe Milford did this, maybe he didn't. But Milford and Myrtle did winter over at Rock Harbor Light one winter. And it's such a sweet story. I mean, to winter over, you got to be prepared. You got to make sure you get all your groceries out there for the whole winter, because there's no boats coming during the winter. And she also got Christmas gifts for all of her kids, and then hid them. And then when Christmas came, every kid got a Christmas gift. It was just so sweet. And that couldn't have been easy to do. Because there were a lot of kids, too. It said 9 earlier, but maybe 8, 9. And I think there's only one remaining person left from that family. But they all went on to have really interesting careers. Like their oldest son, Bobby, captained a boat, a big boat out of Ketchikan, Alaska for several years. So they all went on to, do really interesting things. All the Isle Royale people are really interesting people. 4th of July. Okay, they got one day off, and the fishing company would send out gifts for their customers. And so whiskey came out that day, and ice cream, whiskey and ice cream. What more could you ask? That was a day of celebration. There was a few other things in that package, but I can't remember what they were. So the day would start out with baseball, which, I don't think anybody really cared if they made the bases, or I don't think anybody even kept score, because the day was going to be long and many wondrous things were going to happen that day. So after the baseball game, they would pack up all the picnic baskets and head to Grace Island, which is the next island over, where there was a beautiful, for anybody who's been there, beautiful gravel beach, which is perfect for picnicking, and have their Sanger Fest. So this is where they would plank the lake trout. So in other words, filleted lake trout, lay them out on these beautiful birch planks, and then wire them on, and then stand them near the fire, further from the fire at the beginning of the day, closer to the fire by the end of the day, just before they eat. But they were loaded with butter, basted all day long. So that fish didn't even taste like fish anymore. That was pure butter. It was awesome. So not only did that day, did they eat well during that day, of course they still had their whiskey or something, and then that would lead to singing, the Sanger Fest part, which for some reason the men were more about the singing, because there was a really famous Norwegian men's choir in those days, and some of them actually sang with that group. And Stanley in the middle played this concertina for everything, and he would play until all hours of the night. 3 in the morning he would play. And he would play asleep. I mean, he would, just be playing, and you would see his eyes were closed, and you knew he was asleep, but he would just keep playing. And because he's playing here the afternoon meal, but then the next step is, well, this is after, so this part of the day ended with singing Halsedem, which would bring everybody to tears. Halsedem was a Norwegian song about saying goodbye to their loved ones who they'd never see again when they immigrated. And a song to the sparrows who were going to go tell their loved ones that they loved them. It's just a beautiful song, and anytime you hear a few chords of that, if you've been raised around it, the tears just come. We played it at Howard's celebration, and I noticed a few people cried. Everybody was. And then the next thing is, after the crying, then you get ready for the dance. So from there they would pack up and go down the Wendigo, which is a couple miles up the harbor to the old Wendigo Lodge, where they would roll the kids out in the big room with the big fireplace in their sleeping bags, so that they could just go to sleep and not bother the adults when they were dancing. And the parents would dance till like 2 or 3 a.m. And then at the end of the night, they would pack up the kids in their sleeping bags and pile them in the bow of the boat, counting to make sure they had everything. Because I think they had some experiences about leaving some of the kids. They had to go back for them. But this is such a sweet painting. This is probably one of my favorite paintings. The light in this painting, and it's that, I guess this is one of the things he does the best, is that twilight, like romantic, just grabs you, all the stars. And then just, again, the little firelight in the back. Okay, then occasionally, I guess, opportunists would come and they would shoot a moose to eat, of course. And around the corner is coming either National Park Service or the game warden, and so they're busy hiding the moose meat, hiding the gun, and piling rocks on the hide so that they would sink and get rid of all, they're busy getting rid of all the evidence here. And then there were some cases, of course, when the game warden would come upon them, catch them, and then they would just offer half the moose to the game warden and take it out. Living in the wilderness, that's how it works. You all got to eat. So this is the story where I talked about the first day of school, heading back in the fall, before the whole fishing family would leave. The kids would have to go back, and kind of a romantic scene about the kids going to school, being farmed out with friends and family. So my dad and his sister were raised by, or at that time of year, were farmed out to the Seymours, who then became like a second, our brothers and sisters. It was like we didn't really know whose dad was whose. But yeah, we all look like our dads. So the appropriate dads, I should say. And so it was, a time of partying. Kids are going to school, and fishermen are going to stay out and fish. And this, so the year continues, and so this is the scene as they're actually they're finishing up for the year. So late haul out, not easy, doesn't look fun, let's get over that one. But this is a fun one because they, they get to leave now. And the boat was due 3 weeks ago. And there's no communication, so they're desperately hoping the boat does come, but they don't know. And they don't know, and the only warning that they get is the boat will toot outside the harbor. And then they quick got to get everything ready. So they have to be packed and ready, and then at the last minute grab the hot wood stove, because you don't have 2 wood stoves, you got 1, and get that out to the boat because there's ice in the harbor, get that out the boat in the skiff, and it goes like that. Pretty extraordinary circumstances. And then back on, the winter now, they're back on the mainland. These are fishing family, and it's kind of a romantic scene, again, of Howard's capturing that melancholy light at the end of the day, and the light on the bodies, and the little light in the windows. The light in the windows is crashing every time. It's so nice. And then there were the storms, and I'll kind of screw through these because, if you've seen one storm, you've seen them all, right? But the fishermen had very crafty ways to stay alive in these storms. So they're just pounding home in this one. But sometimes they would tie to a buoy, which the buoy is, of course, a fishing buoy, because they're not close enough to pound home, or it's too rough. They can't turn around. So their only hope is to tie to the buoy that keeps the bow into the waves, and they just wait it out. And then occasionally they would find refuge, which felt really good if they were out there, pounding to come into a nice little cove like this where they could do the annual bilge pump and talk about, wow, wasn't that rough out there? And just feel safe had to feel really good. And waiting for the rest to come in. And occasionally they would pound so hard that the floorboards, not the floorboards, but the actual planks on the hull of the boat would come loose. And this is Einar and Carl, and this actually really did happen. Einar and Carl's boat started to fall apart out there. And so what they could do was run the boat as far from shore as they could get, roll it over on its side as best they could do, as humans can do, and then stuff whatever clothing, underwear, anything they could get into the cracks in the boat as tight as they could, push their boat back out, and head for home. And they made it. I think that only happened like that once. They probably learned a lesson that, we should have caught that one better this time. So just the size of those waves. Do you feel it when you see these things? Yeah. And this is the one that really gets me. So Howard at age 11 was fishing with his dad, Art, and beautiful day. They're in their t-shirts, not a cloud in the sky, gorgeous day, having a great time. And this storm hit like a wall of waves. And Art could see that Carl was in a boat over yonder, and the boat wasn't running. And he just thought, oh my God, he needs help. So they motored our boat over as close to Carl's boat as they could get without, crashing. And Art just leapt like 6 feet into the other boat and left Howard alone in this boat. And Howard's 11, and he just yells back to Howard, just stay outside of the breakers. Don't get inside the breakers. And so, Howard doesn't even have time to think, like, what does that mean, stay outside the breakers? And of course, he's inside the breakers because that's where the boat went. And so the deal there is, if you're inside the breakers, it's shallow, and the waves are going to be a lot harsher and taller and more wicked, more like walls rather than big swells. And so he found himself inside the breakers, but he was able to navigate it, get outside the breakers, got all the way home. He'd be all the way, it was miles from home, all the way around the point, pulled up to the dock, tied up the boat. Thought, it's probably not really good to brag about how amazing you are. But so he walked up to the house and he greeted his mother, and his mother said, "Hi, how are you, buddy?" And I thought, wow, that's odd. But this is a storm on the south side, and it's, the Washington Islands on the north side, and so she didn't know that he'd just come through a storm. But he knew it wasn't good to tell her a story if she didn't, if she didn't like just embrace him. He knew that needed to get that applause someplace else. And so he walked back down to the dock, and Art and Carl did make it back to the dock. And so that was where his big attaboy is going to come from. But again, as Art said, hey, wasn't that was welcome. That's as bad as it got, as good as it got. And he took that as kind of like, well, that's kind of disappointing. But on the other hand, he's treating me like one of the men. So he kind of thought, oh, that's pretty good. I got a pat on the back in kind of a weird way. But that, have you ever been out in seas like that? Oh my God, it's terrifying. Yeah. And if you're the beauty of it is if you're the captain of the boat, you're kind of busy. So, getting scared. Howard never got seasick after he could captain his own boat. So that was something about that control and being so busy that gets you over it. Another scene, not so lucky, winter. It's going to be a while. And then these are the people, of course, waiting for the boats to come home, and they don't really talk about the ones that didn't make it. At least I never heard these stories about the ones that didn't make it. So I just assumed everyone made it. But they did talk about the kids that didn't make it, like because there were several drownings in those days. Not several, there were like 3 or 4. But that's several when it's a kid drowning. Like Roy Oberg lost a kid, Eccles, Dickie and Gladys lost a kid. So parents were really, really careful around the docks, but the water's cold and just, they're busy. But horrible. Oh my God, so horrible. And then when you get wiped out, so this is sort of the scene of my grandfather getting wiped out, and then we know the rest of that story. Didn't end well, but he did get back out there. There were lots of other cabins. Luckily. This is the last slide I have of the paintings, and this is probably my dad's favorite. For me, it's my favorite of his paintings. And to me, this captures like the end of the whole story. A lonely fisherman, old, probably retired, still working here in water by the pail, and the light that is shining on that boat, even though it's on a gas boat, it's a metaphor, it's the end. And the end of the day, that sort of twilight, romantic, melancholy end of the day. And it also was sort of the end of his painting career. After 2012, he didn't paint much. So this is like one of his last paintings. And I just feel like it sort of has all the strength of his painting in a very loose and kind of not as fussy, detailed way as all of his earlier paintings. And yeah, it's my favorite. I love it. And it's not too messy with details about where he was or all that. It's just that you can just feel how he feels. It's like, it's good to be alive, but you won't be long. So I've got a few photos if you want, but you're free to, like I say, don't get embarrassed. So these are the Island Brats in real form. So Tommy Eckel and Betty Sivertson Strong, and Patsy Eckel Nelson, and then my dad buddy, and then Dickie Eckel on the end. They were the Island Brats. And these are the Island Brats having a fun time swimming. So they would, that water is cold. Well, you know how cold Lake Superior water is. That water didn't really warm up in the harbors. Although it did this year, didn't it? Last week I swam. But they had this little dare thing going, so they had to swim every day. And the one who didn't swim was a sissy or whatever. So he swam, no matter what. And Tommy is on top, the boss of all. And Dickie is probably playing with, something. Buddy, Dickie, Patsy, Betty, Skadberg, I can't remember her first name, Skadberg. And I don't know who that is over there, but you can just see that, they're in their best life possible. Buddy, Skadberg, and Betty. So cute. But look at how they're dressed. I don't know what he has on his legs, but they're like, I don't know, he's bandages or something. Yeah, there he is. I don't know.
Those are just his legs, John.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we saw them once. Yeah, they look like that. there's Tidora with Buddy and Betty. Oh, so sweet. But dresses, she always wore dresses. Not pants yet, not that generation. But you kind of see the, the roll roofing on the houses. Our cousins across the bay did some re-roofing on the cabins across the way, and they didn't use roll roofing, they used like shingles and everything. And man, is the park here is mad at them. But it's hard to find roll roofing now. So there's another shot of the kids. Here's Torgerson. We think Herbie Torgerson. So Jeff owned the fish company recently. It's now gone. But Jeff, my brother, was in the back there, and he owned it with a relative, his grandson probably, Herbie Torgerson's son. Okay, with Herbie Torgerson's son, Buddy's son, Herbie Torgerson's son, and then of course if you're going to be in partnership in a fish company, you got to be friends, but they also, you need the fish inspector on your side. So the fish inspector's son was the other partner in that business. And the other story, it didn't go well, did it, Jeff? That partnership. It didn't go well, didn't end well. But the other, I learned from the book that the Torgesons and the Sivertsons didn't get along, even back then. I never knew that, so that carried through. In fact, they would set their nets over the other one, really long ways. But if somebody and I think this is the case between the Torgerson and the Sivertson, I think one did lose their gear in a storm, and the other one enjoyed that competition and that game. So actually landed at his dock and replaced his fishing gear. So generosity played in there too. They didn't want to lose an adversary. That was too much fun. And there's my grandmother and Art and Buddy. Wow. But aren't the boats beautiful? So the early gas boats. And Tidora and Art and Buddy. A lot of Buddy and Betty. Sorry. These photos were, I sort of pulled these photos together for Howard's Memorial. So what a lot of fun shots. And Betty's come, so of course, Tidora and Art. The kids did have a good time. Look at that gorgeous rowboat. And they're still there, Jeff. You've done some of them. At least repainted them, fixed them up because they're really looking cute now. Some of the older generation, there's Tidora and Severine and a bunch of people. Oh, there's Clara, there's Art, there's Merle, Stanley, a child, Stuart. Okay, I guess I didn't know. So that's what Booth Island looked like back in that day. There was a fishery there. The island was sort of directly, kind of key, not too far from Washington Island. And there's the Singer Hotel. So it's hard to imagine going out to Washington Island now and walking those trails, those rooted trails, which are they're pretty well grooved now. And imagining those ladies with those long dresses and those high heels and those, button spats and stuff, walking those trails, it's like, how do they do that? No asphalt over there. But I guess all they had to do was walk from the hotel down the dock and get on the beautiful boat and go to the beautiful stateroom. More. Cute. Oh, I think I'm going backwards, but I thought this one was cute just because I don't know why. But the other thing is about cameras and shooting pictures in these days. It's like that wasn't a common thing, but there are so many really great photographs of the kids and the people, and then of course, from this experience, my dad became a really, really good photographer. And so on our family trips, which we went to Isle Royale every summer, and we would have to pose for Howard trying out his new 4x5 camera or whatever. We spent most of our time posing for the camera. But yeah, they had a good time back then, and this is what they look like now. Maybe a little bit better. This is before the last fix up. And that looks like that now. So the other thing that's interesting about Isle Royale is there were the fishermen, the worker bees, and then there were the wealthy people. And they all lived in community. The Tobin Harbor was wealthy people and fishermen. And definitely the wealthy people really couldn't exist without the fishermen, because the fishermen did all the work and provided food and everything. The wealthy people, when I guess they did help because they would give them money. And that works in our culture, doesn't it? And so this cabin was actually architecturally designed. It was owned by a very wealthy person, A.C. Andrews. And my dad worked for him as a kid. You know, and it's definitely seen better days, but it was really interesting as a kid to go over and look at those cabins and compared to some of our handmade cabins. And then, but a lot of the cabins we inhabited on Washington Island were really cute cabins that were part of the senior hotel too. So they were really nicely designed and had really interesting design features. But this one, when I first walked in, it had one of those photographs, you know, those long photographs, and then it also had this beautiful, like, real Japanese fan tucked up into that hip roof ceiling. That was amazing. So it was, all of these cabins carry a unique history of that wealthy worker. But all the cabins look great. They're all really cute. No extra details in those cabins, and they weren't very tall either. If you were tall, you weren't going to be able to get in and out of those cabins. And these are just, I don't know, I'll just pick Carol Desane, a lot of you know Carol Desane, she took some pictures of the insides of some of the cabins and boathouses out there a few years ago, and these are just some of those detailed insides. Not sure, I mean, it's today, so they haven't been used in years, so they're not well organized. We don't really know what they are. Oh, that's a fun one. But Jeff, the king of floats, he has more floats than anybody in the world, right? And he makes stuff out of them. But just the, you know, the wood decaying and sweet. And that's the Washington Harbor foghorn. So if it got really fogged in, you could just go to Grandma Tedora's deck and blow the foghorn. And boy, you could hear that forever. Really loud. It's still there. Those are still there. All that's still there. It's amazing how long it takes wood to really rot, you know, because it's never been painted or, you know, it might have been creosoted at one time or some kind of, you know, treatment, like that Norwegian treatment that they do on the North House buildings. It might have been that at some time, but there's not been any layer of anything like oil for many years. These are pretty dry lots. And the interiors of the cabins all had really, even the fishermen's cabins, all had really beautiful patterned linoleum tile on the floor. So it's fun. I think this is a recent one. This is Barnum's, and the Barnums were, again, a wealthy family. And I don't know, I think they remodeled. They cheated, they remodeled. And also, the cabins certainly did not have the gas refrigerators they do now. And there's a gas refrigerator at Tedora's, and there's a gas refrigerator at Barnum's. But I don't think any of them work, right? But sweet little places. I don't know what those are. And this was the boat my grandfather built. So Reuben Hill, the Scotts, I think the Scotts relatives of Rick Anderson, and the Hokiland from French River. They were the people that built the boats. But Art Sivertson built this one himself. And it floated and it worked for many years, and then it got retired, and it's been here ever since. And it's there. It's just, you know, resting, waiting for moldering. I love that word, moldering. I just learned about it. Kind of sweet. That's what's left to tell the story. Barnum's, the boathouse. The Barnum cabin was really architecturally designed too. It has some serious design features, hip roofs and stuff. And actually, that design, I think, came from the Bahamas, weirdly enough. But, you know, they were worthy people. The slicker, and this was a little shack. This is called a ham shack. This is where Buddy would be, have stayed once he became a fisherman, like 11 years old. So he'd be sleeping in there. Art would get up in the middle of the night, like 3:30 a.m., come, you know, shuffle over to the cabin, slap his hand real hard on the side of the building to wake him up. And Buddy would get up, and you had to get up because you didn't want art coming for you. You would get up, shuffle down to the boat, because the first thing they would do is go down to the boat, gas up, which meant you had to siphon the gas. So this might have a little to do with why Howard got seasick, but yeah. So that was Howard's job, siphoning the gas. So you know, to siphon gas, you know, one thing goes in the barrel and the other thing goes in your mouth, and you suck it up until you can taste the gas, and then you put your thumb over it and then put it in the boat. And so that would be the first job. Getting the boat all gassed up, ready to go, and then head up to so Grandma's cabin right over here for breakfast. And Grandma would be giving him sidelong looks as he was preparing breakfast and lunch. And just like, is he gonna need lunch? Is he gonna throw up again? Like, oh, I'll pack him lunch anyway. And just like giving him looks of, oh, I feel so sorry for you. You have to go out on the lake again. I know you're gonna be sick. And then they go out on the lake and you get sick. And then, come back, dress all the fish, and start again the next day. So that part wasn't fun, but those years prior to that were a blast, evidently, because he wrote that book and it sounds really cheerful in there. And these are some of the old boat pictures. Look at there, there's a boat called the Bud. And this is before our time. This would have been the late 1800s. Oh my God, I created that mess by trying to do something. And that's the CD going in the water. And there it is today. The beautiful red barrels standing in front of the fish house. I think that's what it looks like today. I don't know, did you change that this year, Joe? It looks like it. Okay. But he replaced everything inside in the last few years. So the inside of the fish house is like brand new. I think that's it. That's the last one. So if you want more of the story, you heard my spiel for $10 to Chik-Wauk, you can have a free book. And the stories get even better.
Thank you.
Would you like one of that? Okay, I'm gonna send you up to Bonnie, and just because I don't want to touch anything, I keep it.
Bonnie, my Bonnie, go with this fellow in the book. Original goodies.
Oh, I haven't seen it. The originals are owned by